This brutal ritual was so extreme, even ancient Rome's darkest entertainment districts banned it. Yet in Constantinople's hippodrome, it happened nightly to children as young as 10. Discover how organized child abuse created history's most dangerous woman and caused the massacre of 30,000 people. The practice was called leader, and the swan. A naked child would lie on stage while trained animals performed acts that would shock modern audiences. 80,000 spectators cheered as coins rained down on a little girl's body. This wasn't just entertainment, it was legalized trafficking on a massive scale. The 10-year-old enduring this nightmare would become the most powerful woman in the Roman Empire. Her name was Theodora. Everything began when her father, the bearkeeper, died. This is how childhood pain creates monsters who change history. When Theodora's father, the bearkeeper, died, it started the most organized child trafficking in ancient history. But to understand how one man's death could ruin an entire family, you need to know about the Byzantine political system that controlled everything. Constantinople in 504 CE is split by two huge political factions, the Blues and the Greens. These aren't just sports teams, they're political parties controlling jobs, entertainment, and government positions. Every citizen belongs to one faction, and that loyalty decides your entire life. Acacius, Theodora's father, held a key position in the Green faction, their official bearkeeper, training massive brown bears for hippodrome combat before 80,000 screaming spectators. When Acacius dies suddenly, his family should automatically get protection and a job. That's the rule. That's how the system works. But here's where everything goes terribly wrong. Asterius, the Greens' dancing master, who controls entertainment jobs, accepts a bribe. Instead of protecting Acacius's widow and 3 daughters, he gives the bearkeeper position to another man completely. With one corrupt decision, he sends 3 little girls into the most advanced child trafficking network in the ancient world. Theodora's mother faces an impossible choice: watch her daughters starve, or feed them to the brutal system that keeps Constantinople's entertainment industry profitable. She chooses survival, but the price is unthinkable. To understand how barbaric these practices were, you need to know that even ancient Romans, who invented gladiator death matches, considered Byzantine circus entertainment too extreme for civilized society. What happens next would be considered organized child abuse in every modern legal system. In a scene of calculated humiliation, Theodora's mother dresses her 3 little girls as suppliants with laurel wreaths and parades them before 80,000 spectators in the hippodrome arena. She's essentially advertising them for intimate services, begging the crowd to take pity on these children who are now available for the entertainment industry's darkest purposes. The Greens, who caused this crisis through corruption, turn their backs completely. Cold, brutal, fine. But the Blues faction takes pity and gives work to the stepfather. This single moment seals Theodora's fate and programs her for revenge on a scale nobody can imagine. She'll never forget who abandoned her family to human trafficking, and who showed mercy. By age 10, Theodora is performing the most degrading acts imaginable. The leader in the swan performance becomes her specialty, lying completely naked on stage while trained geese pick barley seeds from her body as thousands of men cheer and throw coins at a child's naked flesh. Yet this theatrical perversion is just foreplay for what comes after the show. The real horror happens in the back rooms of the hippodrome, where children as young as 8 are expected to provide intimate services to senators, merchants, and wealthy citizens. Byzantine law explicitly states that actresses and performers are equivalent to prostitutes, meaning physical submission isn't just expected, it's legally mandated. Consider the psychological impact. A child who should be learning to read and write is instead discovering how men's carnal desires make them vulnerable, how pain can be profitable, and how her body is her only asset in a world that sees her as disposable. But Theodora isn't just surviving this systematic abuse, she's analyzing it. While other children break under the psychological torture, She's studying the power dynamics. Each night reveals how powerful senators lose control and dignity over a child's body. She observes wealthy merchants become pathetic and desperate for their preferred entertainment. Every performance becomes a masterclass in human weakness, intimate psychology, and the dark mechanics of desire. The hippodrome transforms into her university, and the curriculum is manipulation through physical exploitation. The bearkeeper's death created perfect conditions for producing the most dangerous woman in history. Someone who understands exactly how to weaponize the carnal appetites that men think make them powerful. And Theodora is about to graduate with deadly honors. For 6 years, Theodora endures the most barbaric practices in the ancient world. But while other children are being destroyed by this systematic abuse, she's mastering how to destroy the men who think they own her. By age 16, she's become the hippodrome's most requested performer, not just for her body but for her intelligence. The same senators and merchants who threw coins at her naked 10-year-old body now pay premium prices for private sessions. They think they're buying a prostitute. They have no idea they're creating their own executioner. Then comes the opportunity that will transform her from victim into predator. Hysibulus, the Syrian governor of Libya, visits Constantinople seeking entertainment. He's one of Rome's most powerful provincial governors, controlling vast wealth and military forces. When he sees Theodora perform, he doesn't just want her for a night, he wants to own her completely. The offer is unprecedented. Become his personal concubine, live in luxury, escape the hippodrome's trafficking forever. For a girl who spent 6 years being exploited by strangers, this seems like salvation. Libya, 5116 C. For nearly 4 years, Theodora lives in Hysibulus's palace. But she's not just enjoying luxury. She's receiving her graduate education in intimate manipulation. This is where she discovers that the barbaric practices she endured as a child can be weaponized against the men who think they're in control. Hysibulus believes he owns her body, but Theodora analyzes how his carnal obsessions make him weak. Experience teaches her which desires shame him, which fantasies he'll pay anything to fulfill, which physical practices make him lose his political judgment. Every intimate moment becomes a lesson in psychological warfare. Yet the most important revelation is this: powerful men become completely helpless when they're physically dependent. Hysibulus, who commands armies and governs provinces, transforms into a pathetic, desperate creature when she controls his access to pleasure. The same dynamic she witnessed as a child, influential men losing dignity over erotic entertainment, now becomes her primary weapon. Then she makes a crucial mistake. Theodora begins using her intimate knowledge to manipulate his political decisions. When Hysibulus realizes that his provincial policies are being influenced by his concubine's physical manipulation, he explodes with rage. The scene that follows reveals the true horror of women's positions in this world. "Get out, you worthless expletive!" Hysibulus screams as he hurls her belongings into the burning Libyan sand. She stands there in the desert heat, sweat beading on her skin, the taste of dust and humiliation bitter in her mouth. After 4 years of luxury, she's thrown back into trafficking with nothing. However, this betrayal becomes her most valuable education. The journey back to Constantinople transforms her into the deadliest intimate predator in history. Ship by ship across the Mediterranean, she sells her body to survive, but now she's applying everything learned from Hysibulus. The salt spray stings her face as she systematically destroys every man who thinks he's using her. The cramped quarters below deck reek of unwashed bodies and desperation. But Theodora has learned to thrive in these conditions. Every night, in those suffocating ship holds, she discovers new ways to weaponize physical intimacy. The Roman merchant who pays extra for intelligent conversation, she learns his trade secrets and uses them against his competitor. The ship captain who gives her free passage, she uncovers his smuggling operations and files the information away for future use. Each client becomes a case study in male weakness. She's building a mental database of how carnal desire makes powerful men vulnerable, stupid, and ultimately destroyable. In Alexandria, she makes the connection that will change everything. She converts to monophysite Christianity under Patriarch Timothy. But this isn't spiritual awakening, it's strategic positioning. She's building a religious power base completely independent from the trafficking system that created her. More importantly, in Antioch, she meets Macedonia, a blues faction performer who's been sending information back to Constantinople. Macedonia reveals that a 40-year-old prince named Justinian has been asking specific questions about the former circus girl who survived Libya. What Theodora doesn't realize is that her reputation has preceded her. Stories of a woman who can physically manipulate provincial governors, who survived abandonment and turned it into strength, who understands the dark psychology of powerful men better than they understand themselves. As her ship approaches Constantinople's harbor, she sees the golden domes of the city that cast her out as a child. But she's not the same person who left. The barbaric practices that should have destroyed her have instead created the most dangerous woman in the Roman Empire. She's about to meet the man who will give her the ultimate target for intimate revenge, an entire empire. What happens next proves that the most barbaric practices can be turned into the deadliest political weapon. Theodora is about to use everything learned from systematic exploitation to seduce, manipulate, and ultimately control the future emperor of Rome. Constantinople. When 40-year-old Prince Justinian first sees Theodora at an elite court gathering, he thinks he's looking at just another beautiful former performer. He has no idea he's staring at a woman who has spent 16 years mastering how to destroy powerful men. The seduction begins immediately. But this isn't ordinary attraction. This is intimate warfare, perfected through years of barbaric practice. Theodora employs every technique learned from her exploitation. She studies Justinian's carnal preferences, with the same cold analysis once applied to hippodrome climbing. She discovers his weakness for intelligent conversation during private moments, a preference she learned to exploit with Roman merchants on those Mediterranean ships. She identifies his need for emotional connection, the same vulnerability that made Hebelus physically dependent. The shocking truth she doesn't tell Justinian: during those desperate nights in Alexandria, she learned more than religious conversion. She discovered how to use her body not just for survival, but to completely control men's minds. And Justinian is about to become her greatest experiment in intimate manipulation. The psychological dynamic is terrifying. Justinian believes he's choosing to marry this extraordinary woman, but Theodora is systematically programming his physical obsession. Every private moment is calculated to increase his dependence. Every intimate encounter designed to weaken his political judgment. When Justinian announces his intention to marry her, the court explodes in scandal. You want to marry? The senators can't believe the heir to the Byzantine throne wants to wed a woman who performed degrading acts for entertainment. Yet this scandal reveals the true genius of Theodora's strategy. She's not just seducing Justinian, she's forcing him to choose between political respectability and carnal obsession. And physical addiction always wins. The legal impossibility seems insurmountable. Constantine's ancient laws specifically forbid senators from marrying actresses. Once an actress, always an actress. The legal degradation is permanent, designed to keep erotic entertainers separated from political power forever. However, the real obstacle isn't legal. It's personal. Empress Euphemia stands between Theodora and ultimate power like an immovable barrier. She was once a slave herself, climbing from absolute nothing to the highest position a woman could hold. But Euphemia recognizes exactly what Theodora represents: intimate manipulation, weaponized for political conquest. I climbed up from slavery, Euphemia declares in front of the entire court, her finger pointing accusingly at Theodora. But I was never a prostitute. The confrontation is electric. Former slave versus former trafficking victim, fighting over who deserves to rule an empire. Euphemia understands the danger perfectly. She's not just opposing a marriage. She's trying to prevent a woman trained in barbaric practices from gaining access to imperial power. She blocks every legal reform, uses her influence to prevent marriage discussions, and forbids Theodora from attending court functions. Then, on a cold night in 533 CE, Empress Euphemia dies mysteriously, in her sleep, no warning signs, no illness, no witnesses, just a sudden death that removes the only person capable of stopping Theodora's intimate conquest of the empire. The timing couldn't be more suspicious. Within hours of Euphemia's death, Emperor Justin begins drafting new legislation specifically crafted to allow Theodora's marriage. The law is so targeted it might as well have her name written on it. The terrifying reality: Theodora learned about poisons during her years of trafficking. The experienced prostitutes who survived taught her which herbs could incapacitate dangerous clients, which toxins left no traces, which methods looked like natural death. The sudden demise of the only obstacle to her marriage isn't coincidence. It's the application of knowledge gained through years of abuse. 533. Hagia Sophia. The wedding ceremony represents the ultimate triumph of intimate manipulation over political power. Every step Theodora takes down that marble aisle is calculated theater. The same woman who once performed naked for coins now wears imperial purple silk, but the performance skills remain identical. This isn't just a wedding. It's the coronation of systematic exploitation. The child who endured barbaric practices in the hippodrome has used those same techniques to seduce an emperor, eliminate her primary rival, and position herself as co-ruler of the Roman Empire. But Theodora's intimate manipulation has created something far more dangerous than a powerful marriage. She's produced a partnership based on physical obsession, where political decisions will be influenced by carnal control, and where the brutal practices of her past become the governing philosophy of an empire. The former trafficking victim is about to become the ultimate predator on the largest possible stage. 7 years after weaponizing her exploitation into imperial power, the Empress faces the ultimate test. When 30,000 people demand her death, she'll prove that the most barbaric practices create the most ruthless political monsters. January 50-C. The Nika revolt isn't just political rebellion, it's a direct attack on everything she represents. For the first time in Byzantine history, the blues and greens unite under one battle cry: Nika, conquer. But their real target isn't just the government. It's the former prostitute who manipulated her way to imperial power through intimate warfare. The crowds filling Constantinople's streets aren't just angry about taxes or policies. They're revolting against the fundamental corruption of allowing a woman trained in degrading practices to rule their empire. Every chant of Nika carries the unspoken message: this is the moment she has been preparing for her entire life. Every humiliation in the hippodrome, every manipulation technique learned from trafficking, every psychological weapon developed through childhood trauma, it all leads to this decision. The violence explodes like wildfire through the narrow streets. The acrid smoke of burning buildings stings everyone's eyes as angry mobs surge forward with torches blazing. The original Hagia Sophia erupts in flames, its ancient timbers crackling and collapsing in showers of sparks. The Senate House burns to the ground, centuries of Roman law turning to ash. But for the Empress, watching the city burn isn't terrifying. It's familiar. The chaos reminds her of the hippodrome crowds screaming for erotic entertainment. The same energy that once demanded her naked body is now demanding her death. She understands mob psychology because she learned to manipulate it as a child. The metallic smell of blood mixes with burning wood as armed rebels kill government officials in the streets. Military units defect, throwing down their weapons and joining the revolution. The emperor's own bodyguards question whether they should stay loyal or save themselves. Then the rebels make their ultimate move. They declare Hypatius, nephew of former Emperor Anastasius, as the new emperor. The message thunders through every district: the reign of the corrupt imperial couple is over. Military commanders openly discuss evacuation plans. Treasury chests filled with gold and silver are loaded onto ships in the harbor, wooden planks groaning under the weight. Justinian's closest advisors beg him to flee while escape is still possible, their voices cracking with desperation. January 18th, in the emergency council meeting, the air thick with fear and the distant sounds of rioting echoing outside, every advisor tells Justinian the same thing: run, save your life. Abandon Constantinople. Yet they don't understand what they're asking. They want Justinian to abandon the woman who has controlled him for 7 years through intimate manipulation, whose physical influence has become the foundation of his political identity. They're asking him to reject everything she represents. Then the Empress rises from her chair, her silk robes rustling in the terrified silence. This is the moment when years of exploitation transform into ultimate political power. The 10-year-old girl who learned to perform for violent crowds is about to give the performance of her life. My opinion is that the present time, above all others, is not the right moment for flight, even though it brings safety. Her voice cuts through the panic like a blade, each word carrying the authority of someone who has survived the worst men can do to a woman. May I never be separated from this purple, and may I not live to see the day when those who meet me shall not address me as mistress. She looks directly at Justinian, her dark eyes burning with the accumulated rage of 16 years of childhood abuse. The candles flicker, casting shadows across her face as she delivers the words that will seal 30,000 fates. As for myself, I approve a certain ancient saying, royalty is a good burial shroud. This isn't just political defiance, this is revenge on the ultimate scale. The crowd that wants to kill her represents every man who ever paid to abuse her body. Every senator who threw coins at her naked childhood performances. Every client who thought he owned her because he purchased her service. Justinian, still physically obsessed after 7 years of manipulation, chooses massacre over abandoning his empress. The plan is brutally simple and reveals her deep understanding of crowd psychology. Learned in the Hippodrome, General Belisarius and General Mundus will surround the arena during the rebels' victory celebration, when all enemies are trapped in one location, the same venue where she once performed degrading acts. 100,000 people pack into the Hippodrome, believing they're witnessing the birth of a new empire. Instead, they're walking into the ultimate revenge fantasy of a former trafficking victim. The same arena where she learned that crowds could be manipulated through spectacle will become the site of history's most systematic massacre. The killing begins when the celebration reaches its peak. Imperial soldiers block every exit with grinding metal gates, then move through the crowd with methodical precision. The screams echo off stone walls as families are butchered where they stand, blood pooling in the sand that once absorbed the tears of exploited children. The irony is perfect and terrifying. The arena that taught her how to perform for violent crowds becomes the stage for her ultimate performance, the systematic execution of everyone who dared challenge her conquest of power through intimate manipulation. By day's end, silence replaces screaming. More than 30,000 corpses litter the arena floor. Not one rebel survives. The Hippodrome, where barbaric practices once entertained the masses, becomes a graveyard filled by a woman those practices created. Justinian's 555 CE reform requires all governors to swear loyalty not just to the emperor but to his empress as well. The former trafficking victim has achieved the ultimate revenge, legal recognition as co-ruler of the empire that once exploited her bodies, and people died because barbaric practices created a woman who understood that survival required the complete destruction of anyone who threatened her power. And this is just the beginning of her reign of vengeance. With 30,000 corpses proving her power, the Empress now applies intimate knowledge gained from barbaric practices to systematically eliminate every remaining threat. What happens next reveals how childhood exploitation becomes the perfect training for political assassination. From her private imperial chambers, she operates what historians call a parallel government. But it's really something more sinister, an intelligence network that would make modern spy agencies envious. While Justinian holds court in the Grand Throne Room, she conducts her real business in intimate quarters, where the walls witness whispered confessions and private secrets. Her network functions through manipulation perfected in the Hippodrome. Eunuchs and trusted women move through palace corridors, gathering the most dangerous intelligence possible. Who sleeps with whom? Which senators have shameful preferences? What private secrets could destroy political careers? She institutes a protocol that shocks the imperial court. Everyone must prostrate themselves and kiss both her feet and Justinian's. This isn't just about reverence, it's domination through public humiliation. The same dynamic she experienced as a child performer, now reversed with deadly precision. Now begins her masterpiece of political assassination. When the Pope refuses to restore her religious ally, the Empress doesn't argue theology. She applies manipulation techniques learned from years of trafficking. Working through Belisarius and his wife Antonina, she fabricates treason charges that play on the paranoia of powerful men. The Pope, accused of plotting with the Goths, dies in exile, eliminated by a woman who learned that men's fears make them vulnerable to any accusation. Yet this is just practice for her real target. Target 2, Queen Amalasuntha of the Ostrogoths. Here's where jealousy becomes genocide. Amalasuntha represents everything the Empress fears: natural nobility, inherited power, and worst of all, she's been exchanging correspondence with Justinian about political alliances. She recognizes the signs because she perfected them herself. The late-night reading of letters, the lingering over diplomatic language that could be interpreted as romantic, the political discussions that sound suspiciously like intellectual seduction. She's watching Justinian fall under another woman's influence, using the same techniques she employed to capture him. The solution reveals the predator's mindset. If you can't control them through intimacy, destroy them completely. Using Ambassador Peter the Iberian, she encourages King Theodahad to eliminate his own cousin. The method is deliberately intimate. Amalasuntha is murdered while bathing, vulnerability and physicality combined in the ultimate act of revenge. However, her masterpiece assassination demonstrates how barbaric practices create perfect killers. John the Cappadocian, 5040. More dangerously, he's immune to manipulation because he understands how it works. So she applies the psychological warfare learned as an exploited child. For 6 months she wages a campaign designed to break his mind the same way hers was broken in the Hippodrome. Every day, John receives disturbing gifts that mirror the trauma techniques used on child performers. Wilted flowers representing death, small daggers symbolizing penetration, paintings of execution methods echoing the violence that victims always feel. John begins experiencing the same psychological symptoms she endured as a child: sleeplessness, paranoia, jumping at shadows, sweating through normal interactions. She's reproducing her own childhood trauma in her enemy's mind. Then comes the trap that reveals her true genius. The Empress and Antonina form the deadliest alliance possible. Two women who understand how manipulation destroys men. They use John's own daughter as unwitting bait, arranging a fake conspiracy meeting where surveillance agents record every treasonous word. The fall is instantaneous and complete, from imperial power to begging in Egyptian streets. This is how a woman trained in barbaric practices destroys careers, by understanding that every man's mind can be broken the same way hers was, just with different techniques. These assassinations reveal her greatest achievement, transforming victimhood into predation. She's not just eliminating enemies, she's using the knowledge gained from exploitation to redesign an empire where manipulation becomes the primary governing tool. The former trafficking victim has become the ultimate predator, and she's just getting started. The barbaric practices that created history's deadliest woman are still shaping your world today. Her final victory was transforming childhood exploitation into laws that would govern human behavior for centuries. The Corpus Juris Civilis, the foundation of Western legal tradition, bears the fingerprints of a woman who learned law through systematic abuse. Her legal revolution serves one ultimate purpose: ensuring that no other woman would endure the degrading practices that created her, while simultaneously using those same techniques to maintain absolute. Her anti-prostitution legislation reads like the revenge fantasy of a former trafficking victim. She prohibits forced prostitution, makes it illegal for brothel keepers to prevent women from leaving, and orders the closure of establishments that practice the same exploitation she survived. Yet she also establishes the Metanoia convent, forcing former prostitutes into religious life, controlling other women's physicality the same way hers was once controlled. Her marriage and criminal justice reforms reveal the mind of someone who understands intimate violence deeply. She makes rape punishable by death, regardless of social rank. transfers rapist property to victims, and expands women's divorce rights. These aren't just progressive policies. They're the legal codification of revenge by someone who knows exactly how men use physical power to destroy women. Most telling of all, her succession control operates through manipulation of family structures. She orchestrates marriages throughout the court, punishes those who refuse her politics, and ensures that her conquest of Justinian translates into dynastic control for generations. When the empress dies at 48, probably of cancer, the political impact reveals the true extent of her manipulation. Justinian falls into complete psychological collapse, never remarries, and rules ineffectively for 7. The man she controlled for decades cannot function without the woman who weaponized intimacy for political power. Most damning evidence. Little significant legislation emerges after her death. The legal genius of their partnership dies with the woman who understood how to translate manipulation into governmental control. Archaeological evidence from the San Vitale mosaics shows her depicted larger than other figures, wearing a cloak embroidered with the 3 kings bringing gifts to Christ. She's positioning herself as equal to biblical royalty, the ultimate transformation from trafficking victim to divine authority. Today, tourists take selfies in the Hippodrome, where 10-year-old Theodora once performed degrading acts for coins, the same arena where she later ordered. From that exploited child to the most powerful woman in history, she proved that the most brutal practices can create the most dangerous political monsters, but was transforming victimhood into predation worth. The girl who learned manipulation through childhood exploitation ended up manipulating an entire empire. Her story proves that barbaric practices don't just destroy victims, they can create destroyers.